3, 2, 1.
But
All right, welcome everyone to the Chicago Football Connection podcast. Sorry we're a little late. I had some more technical difficulties, but I think we got it figured out. My name's Stephen Letizia. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Stephen Letizia. You can also make sure to follow the CFC account at CFC Bears. You might notice my background is a little bit different today. I'm at a conference in the Wisconsin Dells, so I'm on a public Wi-Fi. Hopefully we don't have any issues and we're good. So fingers crossed there. But I'm joined by my buddy, Tom Kavanaugh. You can follow him on Twitter at TommyK_NFL Draft. Tom did a great job with me when we did the wide receiver preview, although we didn't talk about Velus Jones. We'll get into that. But I was happy to have him back on. He's one of the best Bears draft guys out there, I think. So, Tom, thanks for coming back on. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I appreciate the kind words. I'm really curious. I'm really curious to get your take on some of these guys because we really haven't talked about them since our last conversation.
Yeah, I am too. We literally have not talked about this at all. So we're going into this not really knowing what the other person is going to say, and I think that's the best way to do it. You just kind of go with the flow and see what happens. So I think best way to do this is just jump right into it and just start at the top and work our way down. So let's start at the first one. Kyler Gordon, the cornerback out of Washington, a guy who, I'll ask your opinion. I've kind of tweeted about it a little bit. What was your thought process when that name flashed across the screen, Kyler Gordon?
Dude, so I was on the other podcast that I do. I was saying like for some reason he just completely blanked my mind. Like I wasn't even considering him at 39. Like in my mind, like I definitely should have kept that possibility open because obviously the Bears have so many needs. But I was really thinking receiver or offensive lineman. And when he was picked, I was shocked. But I liked the pick because I liked the player a lot. I was a big fan of Kyler Gordon's. I think it's very easy to see why the Bears gravitated towards him because of his versatility. A guy kind of started off in the slot and then transitioned to the outside this year, but still did a bunch of different things at Washington in a very zone-heavy scheme. But I honestly thought his best reps came when he was impressed because of how rare, like he is some of the best fluidity in the class of just like straight natural mirror ability, and that short area quickness really shows up on his tape. I honestly like the biggest. Maybe like thing that I think he needs to improve on is some of the zone instincts. Maybe could get better in terms of like playmaking ability, like consistently. But like this is not a guy who blows assignments either. Like he's a pretty sound football player across the board and can do a bunch of different things. Which is why I wanted to ask you, like, where do you see him playing for the Bears? Because with his experience in the slot, I was wondering if Eberflus kind of viewed him as like a Kenny Moore inside out guy.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. That's a point I was going to bring up, and it's a point that we're talk about too with Jaquan Brisker next, is how versatile he is. He, like you said, he played in the slot for 3 years. He played on the outside, and I think moving him around is the best way to go. I'd love to see him matched up on tight ends from time to time. If they're playing like, I don't have their schedule in front of me, but if they're playing like a Travis Kelce or George Kittle, a tight end who's really like a offense's main weapon, I wouldn't be mad about putting Kyler Gordon on him. So yeah, his versatility is key. I liked what you said about not really expecting him to be a draft pick. I was not either. I think every Bears fan was kind of really focused on wide receiver O-line, and that's where everyone's sole focus was. So when that name popped up, I wasn't disappointed at all because I think he's a great player, like you said. I just was not thinking cornerback in that range. I think in both the mock drafts I did, I had them going either wide receiver O-line in the first with their first 2 picks, and then I had them like double and tripling up on corners on day 3, and they kind of did that with offensive line instead. So they had the same. I was on the right track, just different positions. But yeah, I think he's obviously a freak athlete. Tested like one. He was a little slower than I expected. If he ran like a 4.5, I think everyone was expecting to run like a 4.3 or at least in the 4.4s. I also have a score here. We could pull that up while we talk. But obviously his athleticism is going to allow him, to start right away in the NFL. I think he's easily going to slot into the cornerback 2 spot opposite Jalen Johnson. But like we said, I do think he could play in the slot as well. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is Ryan Poles in his pre-draft and I think he was talking about free agents. He was talking about signing guys who have faced adversity. And Kyler Gordon is a guy who got a starting job as a sophomore, his sophomore year at Washington. lost his starting job to Trent McDuffie, who was actually a first-round pick in this draft, and then battled back to not only to get his job back, but be the best, arguably the best cornerback on Washington last year. So he's a guy I really like. Like I said, I think we move him around a little bit. But yeah, we're curious. Do you think he's a guy who can start right away, or do you think he doesn't? I think sometimes Bears fans and fans in general have too high of expectations for a second round pick. So they don't always start right away. But do you think he should start right away, and do you think he can start right away?
Yeah, I think he definitely should start right away. I mean, obviously, like barring a horrible camp performance, like with all the knowns that we have right now, I think he's definitely the second best option that they could throw out there opposite of Jalen Johnson, whether that's in the slot or on the outside. Yeah, I love his versatility, and for as much zone as they ran at Washington, like I'm not saying he's going to be doing this, like the same exact thing with the Bears, but like Eberflus is a zone heavy guy. And that's why I also think it makes a lot of sense that they went him instead of some of the other corners on the board.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up again because I did forget to mention that. Everything I've read about Eberflus's scheme, is zone heavy, and what I've seen of Eberflus, I haven't done like a real breakdown yet. Probably will at some point, but that's a very zone heavy scheme, and they did play a lot of zone at Washington. But I also think Kyler Gordon's best reps came in man coverage, though. Like here, I got some. Obviously, have some videos. So this is that man on a tight end. So in the slot there, he's covering the tight end. This is kind of where I got the idea to move him around and match him up against like a Kelsey or a Kittle or any of those really good tight ends. So you can see how physical he is at the line of scrimmage. He's got good size. He's not one of those corners who's going to get overmatched by size in the NFL. This is him in the slot too, showing off some athleticism, going across the field. Passes a little bit behind him. It still makes a good play on the ball. This is one of my favorite reps. This was in press man, as you mentioned. That is where he really excelled. That that arm to kind of use the sideline to his advantage under the ball skills are just insane there. So he could be, like we said, he can be used in a lot of different ways. I really think, like we mentioned, he can be a starter right away. One other
sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. I only see your background screen or I can't see the video. I hope that doesn't what everyone else is seeing.
No, I think that's just because the way we have it set up. I think everyone else should be able to see. And if you can't, then we're just gonna roll with it. But I think
it's fine. It's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that everyone can see what you're talking about. I didn't want you doing this narration for nothing.
Well, that's a good point. I mean? Someone in the comments, if you're watching, let me know if you can see these videos or not. If you can't, I'll stop showing them. Okay, well, that's good to know that you can't see it at least. But I think that's just the way we have it set up. Again, I'm terrible with technology.
Man, with your color commentating skills, I'm seeing it in my brain, so it's all good.
Exactly. I should be in the Monday Night booth, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
The other thing I got here, this is from PFF, so good to know that you can't see this, but I can kind of explain it to you. This is the Brad Spielberger tweeted this out. I kind of talked about this on my Velus Jones podcast. I definitely talked about it in the Velus Jones podcast, but this is the percentiles for Kyler Gordon from PFF. So it has his coverage grade, no pressure, and man coverage grade, outside cornerback grade, and stuff like that. So his coverage grade was 92nd percentile, obviously very good. Coverage grade with no pressure, a little bit worse, 86th percentile. But his coverage grade on passes less than 3 seconds, which is, kind of where the NFL is going on those quick passes, was 94th percentile. So obviously very good. Coverage grade in single coverage, 96th percentile. Coverage grade outside, 88th percentile. Coverage grade in the slot, 85th percentile. So all of these are, above 80 percentile. His only category below 80th percentile was forced incompletion percentage, 71st percentile. And that is an area I do think he can get a little bit better. His ball skills he had that really good interception that I just showed, but overall, I don't think his ball skills are really that great. He doesn't make a lot of plays on the balls, but he's just always in a really good position to make, and they just doesn't get challenged a lot, I guess I should say, because he's just always sound in coverage. But when he does get challenged, he could make better plays on the ball and could, work on his ball skills a little bit.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. But I like what you said there. It's like he's usually in good position. Like, give me those guys more than the other guys who get like the occasional like
Yeah,
perfect place at the perfect time, like for an interception. Like, I'd rather have you in better shape, like rep in and rep out, than blind squirreling,
yeah,
finding a nut. You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, in an ideal world, you have a cornerback who can do both. But if you do have a cornerback who
Hmm.
can do both, you're not getting him at pick 39 in the draft. He's a
There you go.
easy first round talent. So, but I do think Kyler Gordon is a borderline first round talent. It would not shock me to see teams that had him with a late first round grade. Um,
If he ran like .5 fifths of a second
yeah,
faster in the 40, he's a first round
yeah,
pick for sure.
yeah. Even if he just runs a 4.49, I think just the
Yeah.
visual of a 4.5
Hmm.
puts people off. But I didn't notice him being slow on tape at all. So
Never was a concern for me. I thought he was like,
yeah,
so I was kind of surprised that he didn't.
yeah. Like I said, I
He
thought he was going to
didn't.
run a 4.3, 4.38 or something like that. So
Hmm.
I'm not concerned there, and I don't think the Bears will be either. And um, I think teams will be regretting passing on him once he plays. I did see because Jerry Jones from the Cowboys held up his rankings or whatever, his draft board, the team's draft board, and they had Kyler Gordon at like 24th. So obviously teams were very high on him, and obviously the Bears were as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. I saw that too. That was funny that he held up his board,
I
but
love it. I mean, I feel like he does that every year, which is hilarious to me.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got 11 guys to get through. If this was a Ryan Pace draft, we could spend a half hour talking on each prospect because there's only 4 draft picks.
We'd be done.
Yeah, we'd be done.
We'd
But
be
we got to
done.
get through 11 of these guys. So let's keep it moving. I don't want to have a 5-hour podcast. So the next guy,
Yeah.
pick 48, Jaquan Brisker, safety from Penn State. Obviously, another guy that was very highly regarded, borderline first round pick. Lot of mocks had him going in the first round. Like you said with Gordon, he wasn't really on my radar just because I was just so dialed in on wide receiver and offensive line. But he's obviously a great player. Great. He's another guy who's very versatile. Great in man. He can obviously two deep coverage. Maybe not a single high guy, but two deep coverage. He can play in the box. He can guard the slot. He can cover running backs. He can cover tight ends. How do you see him? What was your opinion on him, and how do you see him working with the Bears defense?
Yeah, no, I definitely. So I actually had a higher grade on him than I did Kyler Gordon, to be honest. So I was a big fan of his. Again, like you said, he was even more of a surprise for me. After they just picked a defensive player, I was like, all right, they're going offense.
Yeah.
Like, nope, they went defense. Yeah, and I obviously love the player. I agree with a lot with what you said. This guy who, I mean, he can play in like the deep. He can play split safety.
Yep.
He can play. Maybe he's not as impactful as a single eye safety, but like he really makes his presence known when he's in the box, covering tight ends and filling the run. But yeah, again, a very like smart, versatile safety who can do a lot of things for your defense. And when you said with Kyler Gordon going through adversity,
Yep.
that definitely applies with him. He lost his brother at a very young age and kind of had a hard time transitioning from high school to college. And then he said he just changed his mindset and really took on a leadership role at Penn State. And yeah, he put in the work in the film room and with his body getting better in that way. And it really shows on the tape. I mean, he's a guy who you get to see him calling out the offense's plays. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it, Steven. I posted a clip of him talking about that interception he had at Wisconsin.
No, I didn't see that.
And like he literally talks through the whole play and like said like in the spring game, Penn State ran the same play and he got burned for it because his assignment was to cover the running back, but the running back stayed in to protect, and then he went to blitz and it went right over his head and they scored. So he was like, okay, I know this play's coming. Like they keep going to the tight end. I know it's a stick now. It's coming right now. So I'm not gonna blitz. I'm just gonna freelance, kind of like not do what I'm supposed to because I know he's throwing the ball right at it. He's like, the moment I saw the quarterback look at the tight end, I just put myself in the right spot and made the game-winning interception.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't see that, but I love when guys kind of talk to that. That just shows how smart they are. And I actually have a video of that interception, so I could play that kind of as you're talking. But yeah, when guys say that about how they saw this and and just the way that they can articulate exactly what they saw and everything like that is just incredible. Yeah, he's another guy, like you said, faced adversity. Junior college transfer, played 3 years at Penn State. super productive, real physical. One thing I want to point out is, this was Kyler Gordon too. Both Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker had 0 penalties the past 2 years, not a single penalty. And for a defensive back, that's crazy. That's so good. So that's something obviously that Poles and Eberflus wanted to get more discipline. They wanted to get guys with more experience. Both these guys were multi-year starters, and I think that's something that the discipline and the multi-year starters. That's not something Ryan Pace necessarily looked at, and not to say that's necessarily means they're going to be great players because they started more and because they're disciplined in college, but it is something that you like to see because we have seen the Bears be very undisciplined the last however many years. So really liked that when I saw that. He's another guy who's really athletic too. I think, when you watch him, you can kind of see athleticism, but he did test a lot better than I anticipated. I didn't think he was a bad athlete by any means, but he had tested it as an elite athlete. And Tom, I know you can't see this, but he got a 4.43 speed. I have the RAS score up right now, 9.88 RAS score. Over 200 pounds, 22 bench reps, 8.5 inch vertical. Decent shuttle and 3-cone skills. So he's another guy who that jump in athleticism shouldn't be a big issue for him.
I definitely agree. I didn't think he was going to be like a blazer either. But when he ran the 4.43, I was like, wow. But there are some times on his tape where it's honestly on the big hits that he has where he'll just like completely just let loose and pull his trigger and just blow someone up. And I'm like, holy crap. Like this dude is a legit athlete. And I think too, like Kyler Gordon, he played at Penn State. They run a lot of zone. Like he's going to be doing a lot of the same things in some capacity what he will with the Bears. And from what I've watched of Eberflus's defense, they love to rotate their safeties post snap. And with his experience of doing multiple different things like that, it's another reason to see why they really liked him.
Yeah, 100% agree. The other thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned how he, his athleticism coming downhill and really laying those big hits on guys. That is something that really stands out on tape and it's something he'll bring to the pros. But the other thing about that is sometimes he might get a little bit too aggressive and try and lay that big hit and not really wrap up. And he does have some missed tackles on tape. So when he does wrap up, he's not going to miss the tackle. But sometimes he just lowers the shoulders and tries to get that highlight reel hit. He needs to be a little bit more disciplined there and know when to go for that big hit and when to just wrap up and take the safe play. So that is something he needs to work on. But I also have his percentiles here as well from PFF. Another one where most of these scores are 80 or higher. A lot of his scores are actually 90 or higher. Coverage grade, 94th percentile. Coverage grade with no pressure, 94th percentile. Coverage grade on passes less than 3 seconds, again, 93rd percentile. Coverage grade at free safety, 96th percentile. Coverage grade in the slot, which I think he will be used a lot, 97th percentile. Interestingly, his coverage grade in the box was only the 69th percentile. So that's a little lower because he did play a lot in the box. But his forced incompletion rate, unlike Kyler Gordon, was a little low. Jaquan Brisker in the 98th percentile, so something he's a little bit more adept at. But yeah, I think this is another good pick. Again, not really expecting them to go defense right off the start, but he does have some impressive tape. I have a video up right now where he's playing. I can't exactly tell this defense. I've watched this video about 50 times, but it looks either like a cover 3 or invert. I don't know what it is, but he makes a good play on the ball. Shows good range. We mentioned his physicality. This is a play where he fights through 2 blockers to make a tackle. Really good player. I think he's just going to be solid all around. He played in the slot and covered slot receivers. He covered tight ends a lot like Kyler Gordon. Here he is covering a tight end. Another guy who's very versatile, and I think that was key to for Eberflus to get guys with that versatility and not be too predictable on your defense. So I think that was something that they valued.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you want to talk about like the perfect complement to Eddie Jackson and like Jaquan Brisker. He's like the textbook definition of what you want opposite of him.
Yeah, exactly. They definitely bring different skill sets to the table. Eddie Jackson's best, and single high, where he can show off his range. Brisker, I don't think is going to be able to play a lot of single high in the NFL. I'm not saying he can't do it, but it's not where he's used best. But he is able to, drop down into the box, which Eddie Jackson really isn't I don't want Eddie Jackson doing. So they do
Yeah.
They do complement each other well there.
For sure.
All right, next guy. So this guy, Velus Jones, I did a whole podcast on him on my own. I know Tom has some interesting thoughts, not interesting thoughts, but good thoughts here. So I won't do much talking here. I did my podcast on Tuesday. It's on the YouTube channel. Anyone who's interested, go watch that. Tom, floor is yours. Talk to me about Velus Jones.
Yeah, so actually when I was watching the draft and he got drafted, my Wi-Fi went out. So like it was literally right before he was about to get picked, and I was like, dude, I'm gonna miss it. Like I'm gonna have to just look at Twitter. And luckily my phone's connection started working, and then the moment I like just heard it start off with the Velus Jones when it came out, and I was like, what? Velus who? Because actually with my first article I wrote for you, not trying to put any Velus Jones slander out there, he was the last in my rankings.
Yep.
So when he was taken at 71, I was a little shell-shocked. I definitely wasn't in love with the pick, and I'm probably still not, but I've tried to watch more. I've tried to come around and kind of understand his situation, because off the bat, once you hear it, just like on its face, it doesn't sound good. There's like, it's hard to get excited about, but like I came around to watching his film, and the biggest thing I was concerned was with him, other than like the outside factors, like on the field concerns, was like the way in which he was used. He was used as kind of a gadget player with a little more of an expanded role, but like not used as a true wide receiver. And granted, Tennessee's offense was like the most college offense ever, like RPOs for days, like rubber routes, like that's all they did. And so you didn't really get to see kind of like what separates receivers and for you to feel good about projecting them to the next level. Obviously, his yards after the catch ability is really encouraging. Like that does translate generally from college to the NFL, and that's probably going to be his calling card, doing things in like, even if he's not creating some of the same production, like by getting open, if you scheme him up and get the ball in his hands, he's dynamic with it. So like that's encouraging. But like he did get open at times. Like it wasn't like he couldn't do it. It just maybe didn't look like conventional. Like it didn't register. I don't even know how to explain it. Like it just kind of worked. And like, do I feel great about that working at as good of a level as it did in college in the NFL? Maybe not, but like it does have me more courage after rewatching him, going back and kind of just trying to watch him with an open mind, and not like I kind of like characterized him in the way that Tennessee used him and just thought he was that. But after I had to rewatch him and like, okay, he at the Senior Bowl he was better and stuff like that. The biggest concern, and I'll leave it to you, Stephen. The biggest concern I have, there's two big ones. His change of direction times were bad, and like you kind of see that on tape. He's not a very lateral guy. He doesn't have like a lot of lateral range with his releases. And then my next big concern is not the age in terms of a next contract. It's the age in you were that much older than everyone else. And is that because you're just a man amongst boys, or are you gonna be as successful to the next league where the playing field's a lot more even? And that is kind of my big concern, because like he didn't break out until his last year. I understand the situation wasn't great, but Stephen, I want to get your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I mean, everything you just said is spot on. Those concerns are valid concerns. The age issue. And I agree with you. It's not the second contract. It's the fact that he had his best year when he was 24 years old, playing against 18, 19, 20-year-olds. So that is a valid concern, and we won't really know that until he gets on the field. The change of direction is something, I talked about on the podcast. That is also a concern. But the thing about Velus Jones that I liked, because I didn't like the pick at first either. I didn't like the pick at all. I was very upset, but I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. But I did rewatch him, and and you said you had him at 18, and you thought that was bad. I didn't have him in my top 18, so I was even worse. But anyway, the thing about Velus Jones is he does that 4.3 speed is legit. The 4.3 speed is legit. The run after the catch ability is legit. So he doesn't have to be an amazing route runner to be a successful NFL player. There's a lot of leeway he has because of that speed and his run after catch ability. So do I think he's going to be a number one wide receiver in the NFL? Hell no. I don't think he is ever going to be that. But I do think he fits well into what the Bears will want to do with mesh routes and rub routes and getting guys open in the flat and letting him create yards after the catch. So I do think he fits exactly what they want to do. They clearly valued run after catch ability. He has it. A guy we're going to talk about later has it as well. So I have come around to the pick again. I could see what I said this on when I did the podcast on my own. I came away from my rewatch understanding why the Bears valued Velus Jones higher than like Jalen Tolbert or the guy, which is the guy I wanted at 71. So I understood why they wanted that over what they could have, and I think that's where most Bears fans are at this point. There's still some people who think it was a wasted pick, but I think most Bears fans can kind of see what they were thinking and why they valued him so high.
I definitely agree with all your stuff. I mean, that's kind of like, I feel like in the nature of these Shanahan disciple coaches, they want guys who are good after the catch because they are confident in themselves to scheme them open. And I guess like that's fine. Like I'm okay with that, and I understand that for sure. I think it just when it hurts you is like on those money downs when you need receivers to get you a bucket, when you need receivers to create some separation on their own on obvious passing situations. Granted, the floor in which the bar in which the Bears need to pass from a scheme perspective from last year is so low. So like, I think Velus Jones is going to have plenty of opportunities to produce in this offense, and Luke Getsy really wanted him reportedly, so I think he's going to have a plan for him, and I'm encouraged from that perspective for sure.
And I also want them to use him as a running back too. Maybe not, running out of the backfield, but sweeps and end arounds and just get him involved and just get the ball in his hands. So, I like I said, I've come around to the pick pretty much. So, but I did cover him a lot in the other podcast, so I don't want to spend too much time on him because I know there are actually a lot of day 3 guys I like. I mentioned how on this rewatch I liked Velus Jones a lot more. There are a couple guys later on that I liked pre-draft and then watched him once the Bears picked him and didn't like them as much. So. I think is good because if I liked everyone that the Bears drafted more after they drafted him, then I'm just being a homer, and that's never good. But a guy that I liked pre-draft and a guy I liked once they drafted him was Braxton Jones, who was their next pick out of Southern Utah, the offensive left tackle, 6'5", 310 pounds, really athletic guy, pretty much the prototypical developmental tackle. I think he's going to struggle if he has to play right away. But he's a guy who he just looks like an NFL left tackle, and a guy who, if you can develop him right, could be really good long term. So, Tom, I'm curious, what were your thoughts when Braxton Jones was the pick?
I loved it because I thought Braxton Jones was like one of the better developmental tackle options available, and just like in this draft on day 3. Like you said, very toolsy, athletic. Dude has 35-inch arms, like crazy tools, and he's a bit raw right now. I think in run blocking wise, like for zone schemes, he's pretty polished. Like he's pretty good at that. At moving people in the run game and getting to the second level when he has to. It's just really in pass protection is where he struggles. I think he needs some work with his hands, wide hands. It's almost like his arms are like too long. I don't even know how to explain it. Like he kind of like needs to get stronger with his punch, like in create that extension. He kind of always wants to play in close quarters. Definitely needs some work with like his punch timing, placement, and then he plays super high, which he lets defenders under him a lot. So I think those are correctable things. Maybe not playing as high as he does, but even in pass protection, like he moves like those are the guys I gravitate towards. You move well, I will like you. If you're like a controlled mover, you're not crazy out of control, like leaning every way. He really doesn't. It's just more of his like posture and his hands that really need to work.
Yeah, I like what you said about him playing 2 upright. That's definitely very obvious. Even if you don't, study a lot of guys, you can just see how upright he is. I also notice he false steps a lot out of his stance, especially in the run game.
Yeah.
He takes he almost does like a Scooby-Doo run. Like he takes 3 or 4 choppy steps before getting out of his stance. And I got a video of that here that I could show. You can see him on the left there. There's just things he needs to clean up. He went to a smaller school, Southern Utah. Another guy who had some adversity, just like all 3 of the guys we've mentioned. So obviously that's something Poles wants to see, people who battle through that. I think he is the prototypical developmental tackle, and in round 5, that's what you can hope for. I know that like there are the guys that I liked, like Matt Let's go from North Dakota, but I think Braxton Jones was the developmental left tackle that I wanted to get. So I was happy when he was drafted.
Mm-hmm.
I had a thought of, and I know he does have prototypical left tackle frame and athleticism, but I'm curious your thoughts on playing him at guard early on. It might be a way that he can maybe get on the field a little bit sooner. He does have some issues, but it might be a way for him to kind of transition to the pros, move him inside to guard, and then move him outside to tackle, in a few years, just as he kind of adjusts. So I'm curious your thoughts there, if you think that's a viable option, or if you just want to keep him at left tackle, even if it means it's a year or two before he starts.
I mean, I think you need it in a pinch, like for sure do it. I mean, like if you want to try him out there, try him out there. I don't think it's like a bad thing to do that. It's just like the thing is, I do think he needs to get stronger, and like I think those problems only get exacerbated when you move inside because you're dealing with beefier dudes. Like, it's harder to play more of a finesse game with inside, in pass protection at least. So that's probably like my biggest concern with him. But there's things you could do to protect him, like with your scheme and getting him help. I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world. If you need to do it, try it out. I mean, why not?
I mean, I'm always a proponent of when it comes to the offensive line is just get the best 5 guys out there and just figure out where to play them later. But you just want to get the best 5 guys out there, and maybe that's Braxton Jones at guard, or maybe it's not. I don't know. And then you just maybe there is something to just don't confuse him. Just he's played 29 games or 30 games at left tackle, whatever it was. Just keep him there and let him develop. So I could see them going both ways. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. But I do like him a lot. Like I said, he was the developmental tackle that I wanted. This is an example of the movement you were talking about. This is a great play where he outside zone run, which the Bears will be running a lot. You can see how he gets to the inside shoulder of the D tackle and then kind of flips his hip and rotates and creates an alley there. Also, the rotational strength in his upper body is real. I know these are lesser competition he's going up against, but you can see how he just throws that guy to the side and opens up a running lane for them. So. And then this last one is just lateral agility. The way he can move laterally, that's what you want out of guys in an outside zone scheme. He can get those reach blocks, get on the opposite end of the D tackle, get those combo blocks, and get up to the second level. It's something he's can do in college. Like you said, I think if the Bears were planning on running the ball 100% of the time, I would play him at left. I would start him at left tackle, but unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. So his growing pains is more in pass blocking, but I do think that was a hell of a pick. If you tell me in 5 years that he was the best player the Bears drafted, I wouldn't be shocked.
I would not be shocked either.
He has that kind of ceiling. So,
mm-hmm.
All right, Braxton Jones done. Up next, went back to defense and we drafted Dominique Robinson from Miami, Ohio. Oh no. Yes, no, it is Miami, Ohio. I have the wrong school listed on there, but that's okay.
Oh no.
I have Western Kentucky. I think I was thinking of
D'Angelo Malone.
They kind of
they're similar players. Similar players for sure.
So Dominique Robinson out of Miami, Ohio, not Western Kentucky. I have some thoughts on Dominique Robinson, but I kind of want to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, I actually liked him quite a bit in comparison to this range. I mean, the athletic tools are obviously present in terms of his testing, his explosive numbers. He's got a really good first step. He flashes some nice moves. I think he definitely needs to take a step with his counters. Like he doesn't really know how to gauge a tackle set to really plan his moves from there. So I think there's some pass rush development that needs to happen. But I really liked his first step, and I think he's honestly pretty decent against the run. Like it wasn't a disaster. Even though he was kind of like a situational player for Miami of Ohio. So the tools are there. The one thing I'm kind of concerned about his ceiling at least is I don't think he's that bendy. Like he didn't really show a lot of flashes of him like ducking the edge for being the speed rusher. So that is kind of worrisome for me because if you're gonna live as a speed rusher, I want you to be bendy, and that's not really his game. But I still think that first step is something to work with, especially if you can take a step as a power rusher, which is not really part of his game right now.
Yeah, that first step is deadly. That's where he's going to have to win in the pros. I do think he's a little bit more bendy than maybe you do. I thought he showed some bend. I don't think it was, necessarily like elite or rare bend, but I thought he showed it from time to time. But you're right. He is.
I thought it was more. I thought it was more of like he was more like tilting. He like
Yeah.
tilts to. He doesn't like duck under tackles more or less. He like
Yeah.
he has like very good change of direction,
Hmm.
but it's not like running under a table, if that makes sense. I don't know
Yeah.
how to explain that.
No, I think running on a table, that's kind of like a scouting phrase for Ben running on a
Yeah.
table. So, and maybe he's not that, but maybe maybe he can get there. I know he probably was really trying to bulk up, so that might that sacrifices some flexibility when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you said, super athletic. That first step is deadly, and that's how he's gonna have to win. He does have a nice like cross chop move to get hands off of him, but I liked Dominic Robinson, but I came away from watching him and thinking I don't know if he's ever going to get to his potential. Because like I said, he has no counters right now. He has very few counters.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know. He has no pass rush plan. He's just all speed and go, and if that doesn't work, he's not getting the sack. And I think he's just so far away from where he needs to be to even be a viable starter. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he could play right away. I think he's a practice squad guy. And a guy you draft in the 5th round. Like I don't see him making an impact in year 1 at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a hamstring injury in training camp and they just put him on IR. Like I don't think he's ready to play. Even as a situational pass rusher, I don't think he's ready.
Yeah, no. With as much development as he needs for sure, and I guess the concerning part about that is he's old. Like he's not a younger prospect, so like that is kind of concerning. Like why weren't you dominating against Miami, the MAC competition? But I mean, he had a really strong Senior Bowl, so that is what kind of why I gave him the benefit of the doubt. But I agree, you probably shouldn't expect much out of him year 1. It's kind of probably like a long-term play with Dominique Robinson.
Yeah, and I think
If that.
in the 5th round, I'm willing to take that risk.
Mm-hmm.
He is there's a high percentage chance that he not only doesn't see the field this year, but never sees the field in the NFL. But there's also a good chance that he becomes a good situational pass rusher, or even potentially an every down player down the road. So I think that's worth the gamble in the 5th round. As you mentioned at the Senior Bowl, he did play really well at the Senior Bowl. I have his PFF stats here, the percentiles. You can see they're obviously very low. Everything is under 50%. But that is part of. We haven't discussed this yet, but he did when he got to Miami of Ohio. He was a quarterback, then transitioned to wide receiver, and then just 2 years ago switched to the edge. So you don't see that transition a lot from prospects going from offensive wide receiver to an edge. Usually, if you're too big for wide receiver, you transition to tight end. So he's very new to the position. He's still learning. So these percentiles, yeah, they might all be under 50%, but like you said, he played much better at the Senior Bowl. And the fact that he was even invited to the Senior Bowl with not many stats. He was only a part-time player at Miami, Ohio. Like he did not play every down. He was a situational pass rusher even in college. So the fact that he was invited to Senior Bowl shows what people thought of him.
It was a nightmare to watch his tape.
I know.
It's like, all right, like what is he gonna play?
Yeah.
Like I just kept watching Miami of Ohio. I was like, all right, I don't really want to do this.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna watch him.
I know, and I kept on having to like rewind. I was like, was that him? Oh yeah, no, go back, go back. That was actually him. I have to watch that play again. So yeah, it was not an enjoyable film watching experience, but yeah, I mean the guy's just a crazy athlete. So you take your chances with that. Here's an example. This is actually against Luke Gadecki, who was the 2nd round pick. You can see how that's his one move that he has, but it worked really well there. Again, he flattens a little bit, but yeah, like you said, not a super bendy. This is a little bit better example of bend, not crazy bend, but a little bit there. But yeah, then if those speed rush moves don't work, he's just got nothing. So, a guy, again, if you tell me in 5 years that he's the best player from this class, I'd be maybe a little surprised, but I'd be like, okay, yeah, he's got a high ceiling. I can believe that. But like we said, he's not going to play right away, and I think that's fine. In the late 5th round, you take your chances on those guys. I think that 4th, 5th rounder where you take those flyers, and then maybe 6th, 7th round you take those guys who are maybe a little safer.
Definitely.
Which is, I think, a good transition to the next guy, Zachary Thomas out of San Diego State. I got the school right this time. 2nd offensive lineman we took. He was a little bit more versatile. He played right tackle, left tackle. He also played a little bit guard. I again have thoughts about Zachary Thomas, but I want to hear your thoughts first. So what was your thought about Zachary Thomas?
Yeah, so he was actually one of the last players I watched because I saw him getting some buzz after he had like a pretty solid combine,
Yeah.
and so I was like, yeah, and I found out he was Cameron Thomas's brother too, so I was like, okay, like maybe he's worth watching, and like yeah, there's definitely some you know parts I admire about his game. I think he's really good, comfortable in zone running schemes. Like that's kind of where you hang your hat on with his game right now. He has some awesome flashes of him just being crazy explosive out of his stance and getting into the second level in a hurry, and like has a really good knack for actually sticking with blocks at the second level, which is kind of hard to find in prospects coming out of school. So he's very controlled in that sense.
Hmm.
Pass protection, complete work in progress. I mean, like he has to be worked from the ground up. His hands are bad, posture's bad. He's not really strong right now in pass protection, so he is definitely a long-term play. He has to get stronger, and that's a little concerning because he's older.
Hmm.
So I don't know how much that maybe changes. There are parts of his game in pass protection, like how he gets out of his stance and how explosive he is getting out of his stance, that is encouraging. And I think even with his hands being as bad as they are, he always does try to get them back inside.
Yeah.
It's just like he's never landing the first punch. He's always letting defenders get in his chest, and that definitely you want to see change before you feel good about playing him at any time for the Bears.
Yeah. Basically what you said, I agree 100%. Yeah, his pass blocking is a mess. Needs to be rebuilt. Run blocking does a lot better. He is very athletic, very quick. He actually had one of the best 10-yard splits of like all time for an offensive lineman. I have it pulled up on the screen right now. You can't see it, but he had a 1.7, I believe. I can't. It was 1.67, 1.7, something like that. The guys that he is comparison there are Lane Johnson, great Eagles right tackle. Teron Armstead, who was great for the Saints for a lot of years. Taylor Lewan, Justin Pugh, Greg Robinson, Rashawn Slater. A lot of guys, when you get to that point of a 10-yard split, you're in elite category there. There are only a few guys on this list who not only weren't successful pros, but weren't all pros. So that is encouraging. But yeah, his pass blocking is a nightmare. It's curious that he was announced as a guard, and I know a lot of people, including Dane Brugler, ranked him as a guard. I actually think he is better as a tackle because of what you said.
I agree.
He struggles with power. He doesn't struggle with speed. He's able to match speed fine. I don't think he's a guard at all. I think he's a tackle, but he was announced as a guard. So we'll see what they do there. I think if he's has to start at right guard for the Bears, they're going to be in trouble. But I think you just keep him at tackle, left or right, whatever you decide, and just maybe he can be. I think he could develop into potentially a swing tackle. I think that's kind of his. I don't want to say ceiling because he could develop into a starter, but I think he could develop into a very good swing tackle. But he's not there yet. His pass blocking is a mess. But if you get a swing tackle in the 6th round, that's a steal. You take that 10 times out of 10. Interesting. I showed his RAS scores as a guard earlier. Thing about that though, and I also have his RAS scores as a tackle. It's obviously not as good. He's a great athlete as a guard, but if you keep him at tackle, he's only a good to a slightly above average athlete. He's not a crazy great athlete as an offensive tackle, but I do think that's probably his best place in the pros.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think he played center, I believe, in one of his years, or like at least I think he said he can play center or whatnot. And so if you're gonna move him on the inside, that's probably where I'd want to play him, just as he's kind of like more of the help guy than a guy who has to take on a lot of one-on-one blocks.
Yeah,
but even then, like I would just keep him at tackle, like you said, like preferably.
Yeah, I would give him a chance to fail at tackle, and yeah, I think that's a very good point. If he doesn't make it as a tackle, put him at center, and he has a chance. I could see that for sure. He has a chance there. I don't think he played that in college. He played some guard, but I do think that would be his second best position would be center. But I would try him at tackle first and see what happens. The other thing I noticed about him, his run blocking is obviously much better than his pass blocking, as we've discussed. But I did notice that when he does run block, he lowers his head and bends at the waist a lot.
He is a waste spender,
man.
man. For sure. He's a waste spender.
And I showed it here. You can kind of see it. I want to pause it like right because the block I have is actually he blocks his guy at success, but you could see I paused it right there. He's just looking straight at the ground, and that's just not gonna work. It might have worked in the Big Sky or whatever conference this is, but it's not gonna work in the NFL. So even his run blocking that was graded higher. I think he was like a 80 in the PFF. He was like an 89 grade in run blocking in a zone blocking scheme, which is really good, obviously, but he still has stuff to clean up even there. So he's a guy that I actually liked when I watched him before because I just watched a little of him, kind of like you did. He's a guy who's pretty low, so I didn't have a chance to do a full film thing beforehand, but I liked what I saw, and then on my rewatch, I didn't like him nearly as much. Not to say that he doesn't have a chance, but I liked the other draft picks better. He's probably, I would say he was probably my least favorite draft pick. Even behind Velus Jones after rewatch.
Wow.
Which means
Zachary Thomas slander.
Oh yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean that means he's going to be an All Pro for the next 12
years.
There you go. So because I'm cursed like that. So if that happens, I will. If that happens, I will gladly play this clip on repeat on my Twitter for the next 12 years. If that happens, I will gladly admit that I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're jinxing for the best. You're doing the Bears solid.
I'm using my jinx for good. It's about time. All right.
There you go.
Next guy is the last Bears player that I watched, and actually I came away pretty impressed. I know we kind of it's Trestan Ebner from Oregon. Tommy, I know we talked about this on Twitter a little bit, but you said that you had to tweet something like, I don't watch running backs anymore because I spent all of 2018, 2019 watching every single running back. And I did the exact same thing. So I hate watching running back film now because that I'm scarred from that year. But I actually really like Trestan Ebner. Not so much as a runner. The only reason I liked him, I'm firmly in the running backs don't matter camp. And I will go to my grave thinking that. But he's actually a really good receiver out of the backfield. And he also lined up wide for the Ducks, too. So I like him a lot as a third down back. Again, maybe he's not going to play right away, but I do think he has potential as a third down back. So I'm curious. I think I know where you stand on running backs, but I'm not 100% sure. What were your thoughts about Trestan Ebner?
I mean, if you're gonna take one, take him in this range of the draft, man. Yeah. I'm happy for that. And I guess here's how I look at running backs now. I think their athletic tests and their advanced level stats do a great job of telling their story, their evaluation from that perspective. The tape helps, but there's not enough gaps in between them to watch and come away with that different of takes. So I really look at the stats, and if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the best at forcing missed tackles in terms of the PFF percentile data. That's really encouraging. That translates from year to year. I think he ran well as well too. I don't think he tested great across the board, but he ran well. So if you have that home run ability and you force missed tackles, I'm interested. And then you can be a good receiver too. I'm very interested in what you have to offer. But again, you're a running back. You can only impact the game so much, and that's kind of my take.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great take, and I'm glad you brought that up because I have the percentiles up on the screen right now. You can't see them, but I can read them off to you. You were right. Missed tackles forced per attempt, 97th percentile. That's something that translates to the pros. So if you are going to draft a running back, that's something they should value very highly. Receiving grade, 78th percentile. Missed tackles forced per reception was the 88th percentile, and yards per out run was the 78th percentile. So obviously a very good receiver. His running grades for BFF were not very good. He was in the 33rd percentile on zone runs, which is what the Bears will be running. His rushing grade was only 38th percentile. That's why I think, he's a third down back. I don't want him to be running the ball a lot, but, if he gets a few carries, that's perfectly fine. But an interesting thought I had with Ebner is I think he's almost a backup to Velus Jones as a wide receiver because they do similar things. They make people miss. They're similar sized. I think they could play him some at receiver as well. He played wide receiver in high school. He was split out wide from time to time at Oregon. I would have no problem playing him as a wide receiver from time to time if they need to, especially with the lack of talent they have at the position. I have some routes here that he ran. This is he's on the outside here at the top of the screen, just a go route. Catches a 60-yard bomb for a touchdown. Not a lot of running backs that can do that. But the way he runs, the way he makes people miss, it reminded me of Velus Jones, honestly, watching them. And I know they play different positions, but I think there is going to be some overlap there with Velus Jones playing some running back, Trestan Ebner possibly playing some wide receiver. I think they're going to use them pretty interchangeably. At least I would play them a little bit interchangeably if Trestan Ebner has to play. But there is also a high possibility that he, is cut or goes to the practice squad. So, but I did see some similarities in their game.
Yeah, and like that's a good thing to keep note of because again, like we mentioned when we're talking about Velus Jones, these Shanahan disciples, they look for guys who can make things happen after the catch. Mm-hmm. So even if he can provide some, a role within the offense and kind of like supplement what the Bears have from a receiving perspective, those guys always intrigue me, especially if you can get them this late. And I mean, I'm not trying to be that guy, but David Montgomery's on the last year of his contract. If you could find his replacement, I know they already have Khalil Herbert, but like running back situations in the league nowadays are usually committee based. So that would always be a find to just kind of get the next man in and no offense to Dave Montgomery, maybe go a different direction.
I 100% agree. I love Dave Montgomery. I think he's a great running back. I would not sign him to an extension. That's not a David Montgomery slander. That's a running back slander. I don't think you should sign any running backs to a contract. So nothing against David Montgomery. I think he's a great player and he's been a great Bear, but it just the value isn't there in terms of money and your limited assets that you have. So yeah, if you can find a running back late in the draft every year who can fill in, and you just have 2 or 3 running backs that you just constantly cycle through, I think most people are coming around to that. I know there are some people who are, still about the bell cow running backs, but I think most people have come around to that fact that you just need multiple ones and let someone else spend their money on your running backs.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree.
All right. Next, drafted another offensive lineman, Doug Kramer from Illinois, staying close to home, coming to Chicago. He played 48 games for Illinois, 48 starts, all at center. He's a center-only prospect. He's not going to be able to play guard, but I think he could be a potential starting center down the road. But he's another guy. Again, we're talking about six-round picks here. I don't see him starting right away. He has some issues with balance. He's on the ground. I think I watched. I forget which game. I think it was like a Nebraska game, and I looked it up because it was so noticeable. There were 62 snaps or something, and I was like, he was on the ground for about 45 of those snaps. Like, it wasn't a minute going out. Like, he was on the ground a lot. And some of it was him just, having a high motor and like going all out to the whistle, but also some of it was, getting knocked back. But he does struggle with power a little bit. He is undersized. He's under 300 pounds, but I do think he has some traits that could be potentially good down the road. He is a good run blocker, pretty poor pass blocker. But yeah, I think, this is a fine pick at this point. I'm curious your thoughts about Doug Kramer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot with what you said. I think he's, out of all these offensive linemen that were taken, he probably has the lowest ceiling because he's just kind of limited in some of the things that his size, like you said, he's undersized, older for being undersized too. It's not a great combo. I think the things I did appreciate about him, though, is like he is pretty good with his hands in pass protection, even though he kind of plays over his skis a little, like you said. And since he's so small, he's so low to the ground. So like guys rarely ever get under him. So he kind of like mitigates the anchor problems with just being naturally more leveraged than most people he goes up against. I think like probably he's probably like Lucas Patrick, and a guy that this is probably a ceiling, like a guy that can be an okay starter for you, but never someone you're content with and you probably want to replace eventually. Just kind of like a average to below average kind of player is kind of where I saw him reaching his ceiling.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's completely fair. And we're talking about 6th-round guys here. So if that does, not all these guys are going to reach these ceilings that we're talking about now. But if you do get one of these offensive line, if one of these 6th and 7th-round offensive linemen turns into either a contributor, that's great, or a starter, that's great. Even if one of them turns into a solid backup, I think that's a win. And I think Kramer can do that, but yeah, it's only going to be at center. He's got really short arms too, which shows up. But he does play really hard. I'll give him that, and he fights, and he was a team captain, and guys respected him. So I do think he has that competitive toughness to make it in the league as maybe center. He kind of reminded me. I had flashbacks to Hronis Grisou, who was the Bears draft pick. Like,
oh no,
I feel
that's not good,
like,
brother.
what
I'm
is that,
sorry.
like
I'm
20
sorry you
years
had
ago?
those.
I know, just because he was like an undersized center, and I was like, but the thing about that was Hronis Grisou was like a 3rd-round pick under Phil Emery, and this guy and Doug Kramer's a 6th-round pick. So I don't care. I mean, if Doug Kramer busts, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But just as like an undersized center with short arms, so hopefully he's a little bit better than Hronis Grisou. I do think this is the only offense that the offense that the Bears run is the only offense that Doug Kramer could fit into, because he is absolutely an outside zone scheme only center. So I think with that going for him, he has a chance to possibly make the team, most likely a practice squad guy.
100%. I totally agree with that. Like he has to be an outside zone. This is not a guy you want doing a whole lot of get power stuff. He's just not strong enough to really do those kinds of things.
Sure. All right. Next is a guy that I actually liked a lot, Jatire Carter from Southern, 6'3", 312 pounds. He played left tackle at Southern, 39 total games, 37 starts, all at left tackle. He's definitely not going to play left tackle in the pros, although curiously Dane Brugler ranked him as a left tackle, but everyone else I've seen has put him at guard, and I do think that's his best place there. So I watched him. There wasn't a lot of Southern tape out there, so I didn't actually watch a lot of him against that competition, which probably is fine, because that's that level, that's a huge jump in level of competition. But I did watch a lot of him at the Senior Bowl, where I think he was one of the better interior offensive linemen at the Senior Bowl. He went up against Logan Hall and Perryman Winfrey and a bunch of other defensive tackles, Travis Jones, and he held his own, and not only held his own, but won a lot of reps too against those guys. So that was really impressive to me. Obviously we're into the 7th round now, so we're getting even farther. But what were your thoughts about Jatire Carter?
I think like the natural ability of his game is what intrigued me the most. Like, is a dude who is pretty strong, like all things considered. Like, even though like the technical parts of his game lead to some pretty ugly losses, at least he had some ugly losses at the Senior Bowl. Like, obviously did look like he couldn't go wrong, but like sometimes he just got beat off the snap, so they look a lot uglier than he was. But it wasn't like he was getting overpowered or like bodied into the quarterback. Like, I think that was like the most intriguing part of his game. Really, my biggest issue with him was his feet. His feet got super narrow sometimes, and that's when he would give up some ground. And I think it was just because he was used to playing tackle and played more of a guard role at the Senior Bowl. Those are kind of the reps I took away from the most, because, like you said, not a whole lot of Southern tape out there available for us to watch. So I think he offers a lot of intriguing tools. I'm looking at his testing right now, and I did not realize how bad his 20-yard shuttle and 3-cone were. So yeah, this is a guy I definitely think should be playing at guard, but the explosive numbers and his 40-yard dash are really intriguing to project him into this outside zone running scheme as a guard.
Yeah, he was definitely. I don't have his RAS scores here. He's the only guy I don't. Oh no, I do have him right here. He actually tested as one of the weaker athletes that the Bears drafted, but he's actually still a very good athlete. At guard, at tackle, not so much, but at guard, I think he's a great athlete, and he does fit perfectly into the outside zone scheme. I love how I think he's actually very good with his hands. I know you mentioned his footwork needs some work, and I 100% agree. But I think he's got a really powerful punch. He's got great grip strength. Once he gets onto a guy,
the reps over.
So those big strong hands, like he's got over 10-inch hands, like and almost 34-inch arms. Like he can use that to his advantage. And that was really impressive to me. That's not something you see a lot out of guys who are 7th round draft picks. So I do think I said on Twitter that I had a real hot take that barring a veteran signing or trade, that Jatire Carter would be the Bears starting right guard. I probably regret saying that. It was a very hot take, but it was what I was thinking at the time. I was just watching him. I was like, man, this guy's got something. This guy. Maybe I was a little spicy there in that take, but I do think he has potential, and is of all these day 3 offensive linemen, he's by far the one I'm most excited about. I think he has a legit chance to maybe not start right away, but to develop into a really good guard in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree because I didn't really know much about him. I saw him at the Senior Bowl and he just wearing a white helmet. So I was like, who is this dude? Like, I have no idea who this
Right.
is. Yeah, no, he definitely intrigued me. Like, I don't want to like keep harping on this, but there was like something natural that he was just naturally good at. And it was like that, like you said, the strength. Like, it did that. He just straight up overpowered guys. And you really don't see that coming out of college because a lot of these guys are lighter.
Right.
And that was not his issue at all. It's a dude who looks like there's not a lot of fat on
Right.
him. Like he's just pretty bulked up and big. So yeah.
Yeah, I have his percentiles up here. So I mean, obviously Southern is historically back college and university, so that those schools don't have a lot of NFL talent, at least players that don't get to the NFL. So possibly overlooked a little bit, but so the talent level he's playing against isn't on the NFL level. But if you look at his stats, if you draft a guy from a smaller school, you want him to dominate, and that's exactly what he did based on these stats. Tommy, I know you can't see this, but I'll read them off to you. Pass block grade, 100th percentile. Pass block grade on true pass hits, 100th percentile. Pass block grade with no play action, 100th percentile. Pass block grade on 5-7 step counters, 100th percentile. Run blocking negative graded plays, 92nd percentile. So this is a guy who dominated his level of competition any way you slice it. Run block grade, I guess, little on zone runs, 64th percentile. So he's a better pass blocker than run blocker. But a guy, I think there's definitely something there to kind of build on. And I wouldn't, maybe he doesn't start right away, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's starting at some point this year for the Bears.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued. This is a guy I'm gonna be watching out for all these guys. But during the preseason, I'm really gonna be watching out for because the Bears. I think the most immediate need on the Bears offensive line right now is who's playing right guard. So he's probably the most in line, barring a Dakota Dozier starting. No offense to you, Dakota Dozier, but yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what he can bring to the table.
Our chances of getting Dakota Dozier on the podcast just went out the window. Thanks, Tom. I
blew it.
I actually messaged Tyree Carter. I was like, "Hey man, really love your tape. I'd love to have you on the podcast." He never got back to me, so we'll see.
Maybe he's a Dakota Dozier fan, and he doesn't want to. Yeah, and he just wants to make sure he has that starting job.
Yeah. All right. That's enough on the 7th round guard prospect. All right, next 7th rounder, Elijah Hicks, safety from Cal. He's a guy I did not watch before the draft. At all, so I didn't have any kind of notions about him when he was picked. But it was a 7th round pick, so I wasn't upset. But I did watch him after. I do think he's a fine player. His highlights are really good, but I think he's just a guy who does everything okay and nothing really great. So I think he's a special teams guy from a 7th round pick. That's fine. Maybe he's a guy who develops into someone who, if he's forced into a start, he doesn't kill you. And I think that's perfectly fine. So he's just a guy who didn't wow me, but again, a 7th round pick, so I'll take it.
I definitely agree. There were I watched a little bit of Cal to try to spot him out, and I think he's a smart player. Maybe not a playmaker, but doesn't really blow his assignments or whatnot. And I was like, man, from what I watched, this 7th round is pretty rough for him. He's not that bad of a player. But then I looked up his pro day, and it was pretty rough across the board, his testing. So kind of made sense.
I'm curious because I was looking up and I couldn't find any athletic testing on him. So do you have that up by any chance? I'm just curious.
I do. So 1 second. It's taking forever to pull up.
I think what you said is he is really smart. Definitely, he's always in the right place, and that's why I think he's a guy who, if he is forced into a start down the road, he's not going to kill you because he is going to be in the right place at the right time. Kind of like DeAndre Houston Carson, I think, is a guy who's a backup safety who gets into the game and he doesn't kill you, and even maybe might make a play from time to time, but he isn't going to be a guy who can start consistently.
Yeah, 100%. So I have his pro day numbers up right here. So he ran a 4.65. Ran a 4.65, not great. He jumped 35.4 inches on the vertical. He ran a 4.34 shuttle, not ideal. And then he jumped 31 inches on the broad. So this is a guy who's not a great athlete, but if you, I hear this on PFF, they talk about it all the time. That's it's a VHS Vision Head Start. Like if you can diagnose plays and get yourself into better positions, like that's probably where you're going to make your living if you're that athletically limited. But this is a guy probably, like you said, Stephen, who you want as a backup and special teamer, and who can just get you out of a game and not be terrible.
And he did play special teams at Cal. That's kind of a common theme on everyone they drafted that wasn't like an offensive lineman, is they all played special teams. Even Kyle Gordon and Jaquan Brisker played special teams, so that's something they clearly value.
Yep.
But yeah, he was productive in college. He played corner early on in his career, transitioned to safety this last year. 72 tackles, 5.5 for loss, a sack, 3 interceptions, 4 fumble force. So he didn't do that by accident. But yeah, those numbers you read off didn't surprise me. It's kind of nothing really flashy on tape, but could be a solid player.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Definitely.
Last guy, and we'll be talking about this guy a lot. Trenton Gill. He's a punter. I know you didn't think I would have any punter videos, but I do. I got one punter video. There he is. Look at him punt the ball. All right, that's all I got on him. Trenton Gill, he's a punter. We have a punter now. And I think we're good there. Unless you have anything you want to add.
I actually wrote like a 10-page scouting report. If you guys have like an extra 30 minutes, I could just read it off to you really quick. That's cool.
ChicagoFootballConnection.com. Make sure to read that. All right. I do have
Do you know like punters and kickers are like the two most unpredictable positions to draft?
Yeah.
Or like their success rate is just all over the board. Like you have no idea what you're getting. But I mean, 7th round, who cares? But yeah.
I mean, like you said, who cares? Who knows? Maybe Trenton Gill will win the punting job. I'm sure that will be on everyone's mind going into training camp. Who wins that coveted punter's job? One last thing, though, before we move on. I do have the list of undrafted free agents, and now I'm just realizing you can't see this. But I'm curious if there are any guys that the Bears signed as an undrafted free agent or brought to rookie minicamp that you knew about or excited about. Anyone you're interested in looking more at?
Jack Sanborn from Wisconsin. I didn't watch him. I just caught glimpses of him watching Leo Chanel. And this is a dude who ran pretty poorly at the 40, but was a pretty good athlete across the board. And I think, honestly, the 40 for linebackers can be overrated sometimes. But he's definitely more of like your Sam linebacker. I could definitely see him making the roster, being that guy, taking on contact on the strong side. Like, that's going to be him when you're on base downs in this 4-3 defense. So, like, I can see him making the roster. And then there was a receiver that I forgot his name. He played at like the quad or something like that.
Cyrus Holder. Yeah.
I could see him maybe sticking around as a special team guy. He ran pretty well and was kind of like a jump ball receiver. I watched a little bit of him and was intrigued. I don't think he's going to be a great separator at the next level, but if you just needed him to fill out your receiver room, I can see him also making the roster.
Yeah, Cyrus Holder was a guy that I actually watched before the draft because I was on the RAS database site and I literally just sorted by wide receivers highest RAS score, and he was on there, so I like watched him randomly, and I was like, okay, this guy is like okay. So like I was happy to see they at least brought him in. Maybe he develops into something. So that was good. With Jack Sanborn, I think you're absolutely right. I think that strong side linebacker position is not a position they've addressed either in free agency or the draft. Like they signed some linebackers in free agency, but none of them were Sam linebackers. So they either really love Caleb Johnson or someone else they have on the roster, or Jack Sanborn has a legit chance to make the team as that strong side linebacker. So I liked him a lot too. Other couple of guys that I liked, Master Teague, running back from Ohio State, I think has a chance. There was a possibility of him getting drafted late in the draft. Landon Lenore from wide receiver from Southern Illinois. I watched a little bit of him. Didn't hate what I saw there. And then last guy I want to mention, my guy, I love this guy pre-draft, Ralph Holley, defensive tackle from Western Michigan.
That's right.
He only got a training camp invite. He didn't even get signed. So he's got an uphill battle, but he's undersized. Anyone's watching this, if you watched Curtis Brooks from Cincinnati, they're very similar players. Undersized, but lightning quick first step. Really probably only a sub-package player, isn't going to play on running downs, but he has a lightning quick first step, good hands. Maybe he could possibly make the team. I'm just hoping he makes it to training camp. So we'll see. All right.
Yeah, 100%. I think for both of those guys too, and we get into this. I was just saying, I think with both those guys, if you can steal like role players like that as undrafted free agents,
Yeah.
like those are where you want to take those guys that aren't playing every down, every snap, and you can just have a role for them, but you're not paying a ton to get that role. So yeah, I love taking shots like that all day
Yeah,
long.
absolutely. And the Bears need to find someone. Hopefully, someone turns it because they just need to fill out their roster.
100%. 100%.
All right, I think we did it. I think we covered everyone. I'm sure we will. I'll wake up tomorrow and be like, oh God, we missed that one thing. But I think we did a good job covering everyone. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Tom, thanks for joining me. It's been a pleasure. As always, definitely we'll do this again, I'm sure.